And you're going to have to see my slides now. There we go. Here we go. Start, share. I'm letting the last few friends in.
That one worked. Oh,
What
slides at
happened
the
now?
side.
Okay, I think everyone's in, and here we go. You're going to see all the slides all the time. Okay, that's where we are. Cool stuff. So, welcome to the class. For those of you who are brand new and you've never been with us before, I'm quickly just going to recap what we get up to on this side of the internet. So, we are a site called Deadlines for Writers. What is Deadlines for Writers? In short, it is the answer to your procrastination woes. We believe that a deadline is the fastest way to fill a blank page. We apply this philosophy to poetry, short stories, and novel writing. In this class, we'll explore dialogue and discuss potential solutions, but remember, these are just tools to help you to identify and address areas that might be hindering your story. Ultimately, the goal is to help you become a more confident and self-aware writer who can trust their own instincts and make informed decisions about their craft. As writers, we have to learn to identify and fix common dialogue problems. For those of you who've not met me, my name is Mia, and I don't know how PowerPoint works, but besides that, I'm a creative writing coach. I have taught, coaxed, and encouraged writers for over 16 years, and most importantly, I've been a writer my whole life. Like you, I struggle with procrastination, self-doubt, and finding the time to write. So I started out in a very formal classroom and I loved teaching face to face. I loved the course. It was a great curriculum, but inevitably that class would be over. We would reach the end of the sessions and the writer would be sent out into the world to fend for themselves. And very few wrote after the class because it's hard doing it on your own. So that's why I created Deadlines for Writers. I wanted to help writers beyond the theory. I wanted to help them reach their goals. I wanted to help them increase their word counts and finish their books. It's a journey. It's not, I didn't just want to set them on the path. I wanted to walk with them. I wanted to share the load. So here we are. So on that note, I quickly want to share some amazing news with you. I have told some of the people who are in our community who I see on Sundays, but I haven't told everyone. Writer or Deadlines for Writers has been added to the Writers Digest 100 and Best Websites for Writers list, which is a very cool accolade for anyone in the writing community. And I'm very excited about this. It's really very special. And I just wanted to say thank you very much to everyone who took the time to nominate us. It's really special. It's not like a competition that you enter or anything like that. It's your people have to go and nominate you and say that they think this is a cool spot. So really thank you for everyone who did that. It was very special and it was an absolutely delightful surprise. I didn't even know we'd been nominated. For those of you who want to go check it out, it is in the um, uh, May-June edition. And this is, I have a digital copy, it's available there. And then you'll find this inside the book. So it's really cool to see. And I'm very thrilled. So thank you for that. It's really awesome. So we are here to talk about dialogue. This session is about 60 to 90 minutes long. This morning we came in just over an hour, which I'm always very happy about. After this class, I am going to make you an offer to join us for the 30 Days of Dialogue Challenge. This class you're in right now is free. The challenge is not. It is 147 US dollars, but please stay tuned for an amazing practical session chock full of writing theory and advice that will help you improve your writing. There are also more bonuses and discounts at the end of this presentation, but I'm going to dive straight into the class. So the first thing I want you to keep in mind about any writing theory, any lesson or any class that you attend is that everything is subjective when it comes to writing. This is creative writing. It can't be right, it can't be wrong. We all have different strengths and weaknesses. The rules in writing are just that, the rules. We learn them, we study them, and then we know how to break them and when to break them. Okay, but that is usually with intention and not just because. So please keep in mind that that this is advice. I like to call this second draft stuff. In your first draft, you are going to put everything down on the page that you need to. And then in your second draft, it's better if you can go back and then start from the beginning and go, what do I need to do? What do I need to change here? If you intentionally try to do this in your first draft, you're going to find it very, very hard to move ahead. So first drafts, you write whatever it is that you need to write. And then the second draft is for you to go and whittle this down and figure it out and to go add all the bits and pieces that we need to add. Okay. So, very quickly, the 30 Days of Dialogue Challenge, as I said, there is a fee attached to it, but it is a challenge plus a course. Okay, so my whole thing with courses are, I don't know about you, but I am the proud owner of many, many online courses that I never finish. I start watching the videos, I never get around to going back to them. And that was something I very deliberately set out to change when I created these challenges and courses. I think that you only really learn how to write when you write. It's the same as riding a bike. We can read all the books about riding a bike, but it doesn't teach you how to ride a bike. You learn to ride a bike by riding the bike. So you're going to learn how to write dialogue by writing dialogue. My stuff is very, very practical. You will receive a email every day with a very small very small lesson and a very small exercise to do, and then you go and write your stuff for the day. So it's very, very practical and it's very, very productive. So that's what we get up to here. Quibus took the dialogue challenge the first time we ran it, and this is what he had to say. Writing 30 stories in 30 days turned out to be an incredible creative wellspring. One of those stories even became a novel. Along the way, my dialogue writing transformed from a weakness into a core strength, and that is the power of focus practice. So we don't take our work lightly here. We work hard and we get stuff done. Now, I'm going to start my class with this quote, which I absolutely adore when it comes to dialogue, because I think one of the biggest things that people miss when it comes to dialogue is what it actually entails and what an absolutely amazing, powerful tool dialogue actually is. So it's a quote by Jerome Stern. And he says, dialogue is not just quotation. It is grimaces, pauses, adjustment of blouse buttons, doodles on a napkin, and crossings of legs. Okay. Dialogue is so much more than just the words that your character says. It's really, really powerful. It's also one of my favorite things when I write, and I love doing dialogue. It's fantastic. So dialogue does have a very specific function in fiction. So what we need our dialogue to do is to show character. The minute someone starts speaking, the way they speak, the words they use, how they move, all of that tells us a little bit about who they are. And that is what you want your dialogue to do. When your character starts talking, that is truly when they come to life. Dialogue moves the story forward. We don't include dialogue just for the sake of dialogue. Mia said, I need dialogue, make them talk. It needs to move the story forward. It's just like description. Your description can be as beautiful as whatever. It can be the most beautiful line written in the history of description. But if it doesn't move the story forward, why do we have it? And the same goes for your dialogue. We need to put really important information in there so that we can move the story forward. Dialogue adds conflict and tension. Now, this is also something that's often overlooked. It's easy, of course, when you are doing an action story and you have characters throwing punches and bombs exploding and car chases. Then conflict is easy, right? Because there's lots of conflict. It's there. It's part of the genre. It's it's automatic almost. But when you're telling a gentler story, like a family drama, or even just like a very feel-good family movie, you still need conflict and tension, but now we don't have fist fights. So what are we going to do? That is where our dialogue really, really helps us. These can be arguments, they can be lies, they can be anything that we build up to, and people learn in their dialogue and what it comes down to. Okay, so it adds conflict and tension. The way when they speak to each other, that adds to all of that. Dialogue gives us information. We often have trouble including backstory, or we need to do a lot of description, but we don't want these solid blocks of text. And that is what our dialogue does for us. It gives us a chance to weave this into the story. And then, of course, dialogue creates white space. And I think this is like one of the most underrated things that dialogue does for you. What we want when we read is we want a page that is not a solid block of text. What happens when you have this solid block of text is that your reader is overwhelmed even before they started reading. You know, you've all been there. You've had a long day, you pick up the book, you want to read a few pages before you go to bed, and there is no reprieve on this page. You close it and you go, not right now, thank you. Your reader is overwhelmed before they've even read a word. So what dialogue does is it gives us a reprieve. So it's actually a design principle where the dialogue where it says what the no, hang on. It says the white space, the lack of text draws your eye to the text, or the lack of I'm messing that up entirely. But the fact that there isn't text on the page or there's less text draws your eye, the absence of text draws your eye to the text. That's what happens. Because the same thing happens with white space. So the less text you have on the page, the more it draws your eye to it. And it gives you that jagged right edge. So one of the things we like to say is try not to justify your pages. I know lawyers love to justify their pages. Don't do that because it overwhelms you before you've read it. So you want that ragged right edge so that you can have this beautiful white space on the page. So that's really something awesome that dialogue does for you. Now, as I said, if you look at that, judged by that quote that Jerome Stern said, is that dialogue is so much more than just the words spoken aloud. It is obviously very simple. Whatever your character says out loud, that's the first part of dialogue. But it also includes the attributions he said and she said. Or like he said, she said, you can use the others as well. The body language of the character. Is your character moving? Is your character sitting while they're speaking, what they're doing? Okay. And then also the thoughts of the character while they're speaking. Rusty, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much for that option. I believe you were saying to not justify text because dialogue then would be weird on the page, but yet most novels are justified. One of my authors was quite shocked when I said that it needed to be justified. He'd never noticed that in a book. And I know that some programs will make a mess of dialogue. If there's a short line, it'll like make it look horrible. Did I hear you
Um,
correctly? Not
a
justified?
published, a published manuscript has been formatted correctly by a professional formatter. Our own formatting programs are not strong enough to be able to do that. And what you'll see happens is you start creating these rivers across your page. If you
Okay.
look, it literally creates these white lines when you go down in terms of spaces and stuff. So that's not a proper justification that you would have
Okay.
when you have it professionally formatted.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
it's a pleasure. Okay. And also the thoughts of the character. So it's the words spoken aloud, it's the attributions, he said, she said, and then the body language of the character plus the thoughts of the character. Okay. Let's quickly talk about the word said. We've all heard things said is dead, and this is terrible, and I want to use this, and said is repetitive. Said is the most beautiful word in the world because said does its job and it disappears. What said is supposed to do is it needs to identify the speaker and it goes off the page. Okay. Um, Stephen King actually gives us numbers, and he said 90% of the time we use said, 10% of the time we can use the other words. Okay, there are a few other things we can do. We'll talk about that as well. But said just does its little job and it disappears. Okay, if you have a conversation with only two people, you can leave off your attributions if it is very clear who is speaking. If it is not clear, do not inconvenience your reader by having to make them go back. You are going to just annoy everyone. Make sure we know who's speaking, but you can leave them off if needed. And it is really better if you can leave them off. But you can also replace it with an action beat. You can replace it with a thought of the character. Okay, it doesn't have to be said in every single instance. Okay, but we'll talk a bit more about that when it comes along. All right. But said is a great little word. Use said. We love said. Okay. The first problem you're going to have with your dialogue is when you have no dialogue. So what do we do then? All right. Now, maybe back in the day, or if it is your specific style, you get away with less dialogue. That's fantastic if it works for you. But most of the time, our modern novels contain way more dialogue than especially the classics do. Okay. Some people have used the numbers of like 50% to of your novel should be dialogue. I have no way to verify that. It's just numbers that I've come across. But you definitely need more dialogue in our novels. If you have any red carpet aspirations, novels with dialogue make better movies than novels without because it's already in a format that translates really well to screen. So your first problem would be not having dialogue. So go look at your page again. If it is the solid block of text with none of that white space, that is exactly what you want to set out to fix. The simplest thing to do is make sure that your character is not stationary and your character is not alone on the page for too long. All right. Sometimes the story just means that the nature of the story is that your character is alone. But even in something like Project Hail Mary, where the character has gone off alone to space, it is that interaction that we go for. That is what we yearn for, what we want to read about, is those relationships that he builds. Okay. So try and add dialogue to your story. There are, of course, exceptions to the rule. And then you can go further from there. Okay. Okay, I'm also just going to ignore the chat a little bit. Okay, so if there's an urgent or something, just give me a shout. But otherwise, I'm not going to look at it right now. Okay, then we have something that we call talking heads. So where our first problem is not enough dialogue, the other problem is too much dialogue. Okay, I don't think we ever thought that could happen, but it really does happen. I adore dialogue. I love dialogue. I throw all the dialogue out there. My first drafts sometimes look like poems because I just have dialogue, 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 dialogue. That's what my first draft looks like. Okay. Yours might be that solid block of text, and you need to go back to add in that dialogue. So, talking heads means there is only the words spoken aloud. You haven't used any of the other tools that are available to you in dialogue. So, talking heads, just the words, and it literally comes from the fact that it feels like there are two, it's like these puppets floating in space, or if you've watched a movie that they shot on green screen. And it's this very green background, and everyone's moving and pretending to do things, but there is nothing else to it. That is the feeling that we get when we have a green screen. Okay, so just pay attention to that. It's fine for a first draft, but we have to be aware of it to go back and to layer in all our other stuff. So that does bring us to layering and subtext. This doesn't translate well from PowerPoint to Canva, or Canva to PowerPoint. So I don't know why I have a floating T, but it's there. Okay, so how we fix that is with layering and subtext. Okay. So with layering, I'll go back and I'll decide who is speaking. So I'll start with my attributions, for example, and I'll decide when I need attributions. Then I'll go and I'll replace some of the attributions with either the thoughts of the viewpoint character, not the thoughts of both characters, the thoughts of the viewpoint character, and the actions of the character, for example, what are they doing? Are they chopping onions? Are they filling up the car with gas? Are they rage cleaning the house while they're having a roaring fight? What is the character doing while they are talking? So that is how I'll start layering in my stuff. And then, of course, the subtext comes from is what is the context of the story that this is taking place? Can my character say one thing and mean something completely different? I love what you've done for the place. The lie slipped from her lips. Okay, you can play with things like that where the character says one thing, but it comes out as something else. All right, that is what we want to aim for and something you really want to use in your novels. Okay, we do that by really knowing who our character is. Okay, you need to know your character and you need to trust your reader. So often we want to over-explain. I hate your guts, John said. John was really angry because Rachel had done this and Rachel had done this. And then you don't need all of that explanation because I understand the context of the story and I know what was happening. Louise, your question? Louise, you are muted if you are speaking. Louise? Okay, I'm not sure. Maybe you did not intend to raise your
Okay,
hand.
no,
Oh,
there we go.
so hi.
Oh, sorry
Yeah,
about that. Okay.
no worries.
The inner thoughts of a character, is that written the same way as a person speaking, or because I thought I understood that it wasn't the same quotation marks.
No, we will do that when we discuss punctuation a little bit later. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Cool stuff. So verbs and adverbs. Okay. Now I know people say things like Stephen King said the road to hell is paved with adverbs and don't use adverbs. It's the worst thing you can do. Yeah, do you know what? An adverb is not the worst thing you can do to your writing as long as there aren't too many of them. Okay. I call adverbs the tequila of writing. There's no such thing as one tequila and there's no such thing as one adverb. Okay. When you start using one adverb, they sneak in there and you have 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 adverbs. Okay. So be very wary of adverbs. A verb, a strong verb is always better. Okay. But it's not the worst thing you can do to your writing, except when it comes to dialogue. I don't want you using adverbs in your dialogue. And I'm talking about adverbs of manner: angrily, furiously, funnily, stupidly, lovingly, warily. Because what happens then is you start explaining your dialogue. So I've just said, make sure that you don't explain to your reader, but you don't need most of them. So it's things like, I hate your guts, he said angrily. I don't need the angrily. You're my favorite person on earth, she said lovingly. Okay. Anne, your question?
Um,
No, Anne, you've muted yourself again. Anne, you're still muted. There you are. Hello.
that was hard work.
Sorry.
Okay, so I'll be honest, I'm not a technical writer, and I find myself, I get very confused when people start getting very technical. So when you say like adverbs, I know what a verb is, but an adverb goes right past me. And I was wondering
Okay.
if you could just explain that so that I know what we're talking about.
All right. A verb is your doing word. Run, walk,
Yes.
whatever it is, okay? An adverb describes how that action is done. He ran fast, he ran slowly, so these words, especially that end with the ly, we call them adverbs of manner. So those are the ones you particularly want to go take a look at. So any piece of writing you do, these tend to sneak in. So go and look for any word that ends on an ly and interrogate that. So instead of saying run fast, you can say he sprinted, because there's always a stronger verb to be used in the place of the adverb.
All right. Okay, that's great.
Cool. Awesome. All right. That's great. Okay. So avoid adverbs of manner in your dialogue if you can, because what it does, it explains the dialogue. And what you want is you want your dialogue to be able to stand on its own. And the context of the story needs to tell me what's happening in the dialogue. If you need to explain to me why he's angry, you haven't done your job in other places. Okay, so I really am going to strongly encourage you to avoid adverbs, especially in your dialogue. Okay, if you want to use them every now and then in terms of degrees and description, and all means do that, just be aware of the fact that they do tend to multiply. Okay, repetition is one of my favorite things to do with dialogue, is when you take a character's line and you repeat it. So later with a different meaning. So that's also where you can play with your subtext, and it's really, really delicious. If you look, the beginning of Toy Story is one of my favorite movies. And when Buzz arrives in Andy's room, he's busy showing off his wings to all the other toys, and Woody is really bitter. And Woody goes, "That's not flying, it's falling with style." And then, of course, the two friends get lost and they go on this adventure and they try to reunite with Andy. And then right at the end, when it is Buzz's ability to glide that saves them, Buzz is the one who says Woody's words verbatim. And he says, "That's not flying, that's falling with style." And that verbatim shows us the change, it shows us the progress in their relationship. It completes their little arc. It's lovely. Okay, so repetition is really, really powerful. One of the other examples that I like to use is, this is the song Cats in the Cradle. And if you know the song, by all means go listen to it, but listen to it with an ear for dialogue. So it, of course, starts with the young boy. He's born and the father is very busy and he's traveling. And when the child is small, he says to his father, "I'm going to be like you, Dad. I know, I'm going to be like you." And then, of course, the story progresses again through the years, and the character is an adult, and his father phones and says, "Hey, do you want to hang out?" And the son says he's too busy, and then there's this and all these excuses. And then, of course, the father comes to the realization and he says, "As I hung up the phone, it occurred to me he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me." So it's not verbatim like the Toy Story example, but this is still beautiful use of repetition. Okay, it's always a very, very powerful use, powerful tool in your stories, and you can It doesn't just have to be dialogue. There's a lot that you can repeat, but repetition and dialogue especially is very, very good. Intentional repetition. I don't want lazy repetition. I want intentional repetition where you stand there and say, this is what I'm going to change here. Okay. Setting is also a beautiful thing to include in your dialogue because it takes away that need for these giant blocks of text. Okay, so yes, weave in your descriptions by all means, but when your characters talk about the setting or interact with the setting, because remember, dialogue, body language is also part of dialogue. The character's chopping onions, the character says, please pass the salt. That is all setting interaction that gives me clues of where my characters are. So, what a dump, or where are we? None of this looks familiar. Land ho, or final boarding call for passenger, or access denied. Those are all phrases of dialogue that I'm hoping has conjured a different picture in your mind when you heard each one of them. So what a dump. I'm sure each one had a different version of a dump. Someone was at a literal rubbish dump. Someone was at a place that was falling apart and was a dump. Or perhaps your character is a rich, spoiled brat walking into a non-mansion like home going, what a dump. Okay. All of that can really work very hard for you. Where are we? None of this looks familiar. I think we all had a different situation where we felt some were hikers, some was in a car, whatever it was. Land ho, I hope you're all on the boat with a pirate ship and we were going to find some treasure. Final boarding call for passengers. I'm hoping you were running across the airport with your little trolley bag clacking behind you to make the plane. And access denied. There was most likely a big steel door, a keypad, a small little glass window. We were panicking. We had to get in some way. That is how effective dialogue can be to explain or to introduce your setting or to include your setting. So it's all about balance and variety. Sometimes we want to have the narrative and sometimes we want to have the dialogue. It really, really helps to get our stories in there. Okay. Show, don't tell. So this is, of course, advice that is repeated over and over and over again. But if you struggle with showing, dialogue is one of the easiest ways, and it's like one of the first steps that we do. There are about 6 or 7 things that you can do to your writing to go from telling to showing. And dialogue is one of the simplest and fastest ways to do that. So if you constantly get the feedback advice, you should be showing, try and show more. I think you should show more. It is most likely a clue that you are not using dialogue. Okay, so see if you can include some more dialogue in your story, and that'll help you to automatically start showing a bit more. Okay, it's really, really an effective tool. So instead of telling me about the conversation or telling me about a character, if your character's sitting alone on the couch, I can't believe that happened. How could they say that? And they're having this conversation with themselves. Can you take me to the scene where the actual action happened and we see what the character got up to? Okay. It's really, really effective for showing. Then we have something I like to call phone a friend. Okay, because sometimes the problem is that you have no dialogue, and then what is your character going to get up to? If there's no one around them, how can they talk? Is there a way that they can phone a friend? Remember, the function of your friend character in literature is to support the main character, to help them achieve their goals. So it's a very natural thing for them to be able to turn to a friend. When you're having a good day, you tell your friend. When you're having a bad day, you tell your friend. When you have a body to bury, hopefully you phone a friend. Okay. So what kind of conversations can they have with their friend to help us give backstory, to include new stuff? The phone a friend is really effective. So one of the movies that I really, really love that does this very well, it's the whole concept for the movie, the characters alone, and they need to be able to move the story along, is a movie called Lock with Tom Hardy, I think. But the movie starts with, you learn a lot about concrete. It's very interesting. But he is some kind of building engineer, and they're going to do the biggest concrete pour in Europe. They're building one of these giant skyscrapers, and they have to pour all the concrete in one day. So it's literally the biggest concrete pour in Europe. It's record breaking. He is at the pinnacle of his career. It's fantastic. His wife's phoned. She cooked his favorite meal for dinner, and the kids are saying, Dad, where are you? We're already wearing your football jerseys. The game's going to start when you're coming home. He says, I'll be there now. It's great. Then he receives one phone call and he turns his back on all of that and he drives away. By the end of the movie, he's lost his job, he's lost his wife, he's lost his family. Okay. And that is all done through a series of phone calls. It's fascinating to see how the character is alone and how they're going. Yeah, so Hail Mary also, long periods of alone time and how he moves through everything and what he has to do. Okay, phone a friend, find the equivalent of that. So obviously, if you're writing historical fiction, we're not picking up phone. Okay, but that's what we have something called the epistolary novels, and these are novels that use letter writing or email. So phone a friend is really, really effective. Okay. Dialogue and backstory. Use your dialogue to include your backstory. It's also a great way of showing your backstory. So remember when I said the friend character helps your main character achieve their goal? But the friend character also most often knows your main character's backstory. Okay. Or they're close enough that they can share that kind of information. The same with a romantic partner. Once the relationship progresses and they become more vulnerable and there's more trust, they'll start sharing a bit more of their backstory that isn't immediately apparent or on the page yet. So you can really start putting things in there and start explaining stuff. Okay, so dialogue is a great tool for backstory. Okay. If, for example, let's say your character has a very conflicted relationship with the mother, and their friend character is there and the cell phone rings and it's their mom's, it says mom on the cover, and the friend goes to the main character and says, how did she get this number? And then either the friend's been speaking to the mother in secret and hiding it from the friend, or the mother is contacting them, is she back in the country? Is she out of rehab? What is the situation there? But that is all that you can include, like a conflicted relationship with the mother, through dialogue, and include your backstory. Okay, very, very powerful tool to do with dialogue, as opposed to having to list it from scratch. Okay. Dialogue is also a great tool for conflict. Okay, so I said right in the beginning, if you don't have fistfights and car chases and bombs exploding, we still need conflict. Okay, even if you're telling the happiest, gentlest story on earth, there still needs to be conflict. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. There are no stakes. If there aren't stakes, what are we going to do? So when we use dialogue for conflict, characters can reveal secrets. Characters can lie. If your character is relentlessly teased, that is all conflict. It's fantastic. What you also have to keep in mind, and this is something that we underestimate about conflict, is conflict does not have to always be negative. Conflict can be positive events as well. So if your character has just met the love of their life, okay, they are besotted in love. It's the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to them. They are so, so, so happy. And they get a phone call. And it is a job offer across the country, which is their dream come true. It's what they've been working towards for the last 15 years. It is going to pay off all their debt. It is going to be brilliant, but it means leaving the new relationship behind. That's conflict. And all of that needs to be discussed and resolved or not resolved through dialogue. Okay, so conflict is a fantastic tool to introduce, to use dialogue with. How can your character, like I said, there's teasing, there's lying. Your character can wheedle, they can cajole, whatever it is that you need to do, you can build tension through your dialogue, which is really, really great. Okay. This is what Kath said about our dialogue challenge. After practicing dialogue every day for 30 days, it comes more naturally as a craft than it did before. The other elements of writing a scene or story to zero in on and the value of this challenge is freedom from all the other elements of writing a scene or story, to zero in on making sure the dialogue itself is alive and true to life. Once learned, these lessons become part of a skill set available to apply to all future scenes and stories, a worthwhile investment. Okay. Your next problem with your character is that they all sound the same, which is really a challenge, especially in the beginning when we start writing. We tend to write like we speak. So all our characters right through the story sound exactly like we do. So again, for your first draft, let rip, put it all down. In your second draft, when you know your characters much better, or even later in your draft, you get to know your characters better. And then you learn that they have different speaking habits. If you thought your character was loud and extroverted and they were all over the place and speaking the whole time, only, to have a friend character that was very quiet and introverted. Okay, those are two different ways that you can use dialogue. If your character speaks nonstop versus a character that barely utters a word, go and see how different people speak. Think about people in your own life. Some people rarely open their mouths, but when they do, they drop like this one-liner that's just epic. Is that your character? It's really, really interesting to start studying how people speak. And that is what you must start moving towards in your dialogue. You want them to not all sound the same. And that's really difficult if you have characters in the same situation with the same upbringing. So you really have to pay attention to how people talk. If you, for example, have this, neighborhood gangster versus the English professor, those are fairly easy. The English professor would probably speak in full sentences, not use contractions, have a more robust vocabulary, and your gang member would have some kind of slang they're speaking. I'm not going to even attempt that, but some kind of slang they speak, a whole dialect of their own that they're using, which could really, really be a cool way to show the difference between the two characters. Okay, but pay attention to how people speak. Something to be aware of in dialogue is profanity, accents, and dialogue. Okay. So, profanity, the rule of thumb that we tend to use there is that dirty words look dirtier on the page. So, when it comes to profanity, definitely go for less is more. The example I always like to use here is if you've ever read The Wolf of Wall Street, that Jordan Belfort, I think his name is, if you had to take all the F-bombs out of that book, I think they would have cut the word count by half because it is just like F, 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 and the word starts losing its efficacy. Okay. Whereas if you are writing a story, and also like if you're writing a story about drug dealers and it's guns and it's kidnappings and it's hectic things, your character is also not going to say, oh, diddly squat, darn it, what just happened? That's not how they're going to speak either. So you really have to understand who your character is and when they would start using things like profanity. If you have a character, which is for, let's say she's this PTA mom and it is just like perfect hair, perfect brows, perfect nails, and she is standing in front of the hall with all of these little middle graders in front of her, but she's having a hard time with the mic, and she is, can't get it to work, and she's trying everything, and she's ha ha ha, being so polite, and the next moment she says, oh, fuck it. And then the mic's on loud. She's sworn in front of the whole thing. And, she is basically dethroned as the queen of the PTA moms. Okay. That would be a very, very effective F-bomb. Whereas if your characters are dropping them left, right, and center, they kind of aren't as effective as they need to be. All right. But the same thing as well. Your drug dealers are not going to say diddly squat. If you're doing something like sci-fi, or anything with a made-up language, like a fantasy story or something, pay attention to, is there profanity in that language that you've created? Most of the time, you would have some kind of profanity. If you've read Red Rising, I think Pierce Brown is his name. I could be wrong, but it's one of my favorite sci-fi books, where the crux of he's trying to infiltrate a certain part of society, and the one thing that will give him away is profanity, is the swear word that he uses, because the class that he's infiltrating will never ever say that. Whereas that's one of the clues that it gives you to see who the character is. It's really, really interesting use of profanity. Okay, accents and dialects the same. Proceed with caution. All right. So for those of you who did the Plain Plot Club with me when we discussed the Alice Network, Finn is a Scottish character. And I loved the way she wrote that he was Scottish without having to go, he was a Scotsman. And no one changed the spelling of anything, but he referred to her as a lass, and he used a word like bairn instead of baby. And that was more than enough for us to know he was Scottish. Okay. And the other characters described him as Scottish, but we never had to change his spelling. So if you had a French character, for example, and then you changed everything to have a Z, and you zings, Try not to do that. Okay. You want to keep your spelling the same because that's very, very jarring to read. But then go look at things in that language that you can go find, like this, the lass or the bairn, or something like if it was French, use words like bonjour, words like oui, because most of us would recognize that word. It doesn't impede our understanding of the text, but we need those words to just ground us a little bit to say that this is a French character or something like that. Okay, so just be cautious of those things. Okay. A really cool thing that I like to use in social media is it's a very cool thing to use in dialogue is social media. Okay, when you have two characters having a conversation on Facebook, or they're having this rip-roaring fight in a Facebook comment section, that's awesome dialogue. Okay, it's really, really fun to do. So it's like the epistolary novels that we had, or the diary entries, or anything. But if you have a blog, for example, Bridget Jones was diaries. What character? There was a book that I read the other day where they used a series of blog posts. Now, of course, cannot remember the book, but it was very, very interesting to see where the characters would write these blog posts, what happened in real life, and then what happened in the blog post. And that was kind of like a very interesting juxtaposition that we had there. But social media is a fantastic thing to use. Even just a WhatsApp exchange like this. Where, I mean, I don't know if you can use all of that. Like the ebooks, for example, tend to restrict the images. But if you can just have a conversation where you can see these two characters are texting each other, it's really, really cool to use. And be wary of obviously overusing a technique like this or something, but it would be really weird if you had a present day story and there was not a mention of a phone or a text or anything like that. Okay. But it can really, really be fun to use that. So I'm very quickly going to look at punctuation. Punctuation is very simple to understand, but we tend to overcomplicate it. Okay. If you join us for the challenge, we are doing that first week, a full punctuation class. Okay. So I'll send all that information through to you guys and we'll go through all of this in detail. But just quickly to say now, dialogue formatting starts with manuscript formatting. Okay, so if you go onto the site on our freebies page, you'll see there's a how to format your manuscript download. Go find that and start practicing your manuscript formatting. If you get manuscript formatting right, it's so much easier to have your dialogue formatting fall into place. Okay. Because the first simple rule is new speaker, new line. So you literally go, John said, Jane said, John said, Jane said. And that's, remember, where we get that delicious white space. We use quotation marks, but only for the word the character says aloud. Those go inside the quotation marks. You can use double quotation marks. You can use single quotation marks. You can use a dash or nothing at all. Margaret Atwood loves nothing at all. Okay. So it's totally, totally up to you. The most common is double quotation or single quotation. Okay. The only thing I would ask for you to be is consistent. If you start with double, stick to double. If you start with single, stick to single. Okay. If you don't want to use any quotation marks, just double check that we know what's going on. But just be very clear, because that is what punctuation does for it. It gives clarity. Do not inconvenience your reader when you're trying to be smart and all literary, and then everyone's just confused. Okay, so the quotation marks are for the words spoken aloud, as in like literally the words they say. Most of the time, you're going to have a dialogue tag. So the comma, the question mark, and the exclamation marks go inside the quotation mark. Then you have a lowercase said and the character's name. Okay, because all of that, from the open quotation marks to the full stop after said, form one sentence. So that's why it's lowercase. You'll also do it differently. John, capital, said lowercase, comma, open quotation marks, I'll take the dog for a walk, full stop, close quotation marks. Okay. That is all one sentence. When you have an action beat following the dialogue, I'll take the dog for a walk. John took the leash off the hook and went to find the dogs. That is a separate sentence all on its own. I'll take the dogs for a walk, quotation mark, full stop, quotation mark. John takes the leash off the hook is a whole new sentence. Capital letter John, full stop. Okay. When your character's speech is interrupted, you'll either use an ellipse or an em dash. Now, an em dash is for an abrupt stop, like in the door slams in his face and he can't finish his sentence. That would be a dash for an abrupt stop. If your character's voice trails off, let's say it's a theater room setting or theater setting, and your character is going for an operation and he's still talking to the anesthetist, and as he drifts off and says something ridiculous, you'll have a little ellipse there because then their speech has trailed off. Okay. And then the character's thoughts do not need quotation, italics. Okay. They definitely do not take quotation marks. All right. So you can either use a dialogue tag, you can use an action beat, what the character is doing, or the character's thoughts to identify the speaker. So there's a lot of variety you can have there. So you literally don't have to use said for every single thing, but don't put the thoughts in italics. Or some people do, but then you like end up with a whole bunch of italics on the page. And italics is actually better for emphasis. Okay. Sometimes fantasy readers will use italics for like when the characters are telepathically speaking or they're showing a different kind of speech, but it's still not words spoken aloud. Ashini, your question?
Hi, Mia. Yes, quick question. If the person speaks out loud, not to somebody, but is alone and exclaims or actually says his thought out loud, does that go within quotation marks or not?
If it's spoken aloud, it takes quotation marks. Otherwise, it's a thought.
Even if it's okay, super, thanks.
Okay. Cool stuff. So I know we love italics and thoughts, but try and use it rather for emphasis, okay, as opposed to putting everything in italics, because otherwise it just tends to be too much. All right. Don't overthink the punctuation. Don't let it stop you. Go write your dialogue, but I promise you it starts with manuscript formatting. If you go fix your manuscript formatting, this becomes much easier. Okay. Just pay attention to that. Now, for those of you, the challenge is 30 days that we do. And I know a lot of you are doing other challenges. You're doing 12 short stories challenge, you're doing 52 scenes challenge, or you're writing a book, whatever that is that you're doing. So how to use this challenge? The 30-day challenges are pretty intense, but they're amazingly productive. Okay, so every day you receive an email. The email has a prompt and the email has a short little lesson. So we will discuss one thing of the theory. You'll write up to 500 words. Okay, so there's no specific word count. It's not like our flash challenge where you have to hit the word count exactly. What you can do is you can write up to 500 words. So you can write 200 words, you can write 50 words, you can write 500 words per day. And then remember, you post one and you read 3. Okay. So how I used the challenge while I was writing my novel was I was in a single viewpoint character for my whole duration of my novel. So what I did then was I used the 30-day challenge to go into other viewpoints and also to write scenes that weren't necessarily part of my novel. So there were backstory scenes that I didn't want to use in the story, but I wanted to write them so that I could see what happened in that scene and how the characters reacted. So it really helps you to get to know your character and your other characters. Okay. So I played with viewpoint. I wrote different kinds of scenes that weren't included in my story. I used it to generate ideas because I had option A that could happen, and then I used it for option B. Or if you, like Quibus also said in his quote, he had a whole idea for a novel that came out of one of the 30-day prompts. So you'll meet new characters that you introduce, you'll put them on the page and things will happen. If you write flash, it's a fantastic exercise because everything's under 500 words and you will really start to build up a bank of work for flash fiction. Of course, it's fantastic discipline. Okay, so it teaches you to write every day for 30 days. For most of us, they say it takes 21 days to build a habit. So this is a really, really good start to doing that. And then you can also do things like explore different parts and different thoughts and really get into a character's head while you're doing this. It's really, really fun. Okay. Emery, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious if there's any other feedback, like from you on these, or if it's just the comments that you get from others. I've never done any of this challenge.
It's cool. You're welcome to ask. It's peer review, and then I don't read any of those stories, but I do appraisals and stuff. So if there's something you specifically want to do, you can ask me. And at any point in the challenge, you have a big red button. So if you are worried about something, if something's not working, you just pop me an email and we sort it out and we can quickly take a look at something. If there's something specific you can ask, you can draw my attention to it. But I unfortunately just don't have capacity to sit in there and read everyone's stories. I'd love to, but unfortunately I can't do that. Okay, but I
For
am
sure.
available
Makes
to look
sense.
at specific things. Okay,
Cool, thank you.
cool stuff. It's a pleasure. Another thing that we do for the challenge is because you will have this access to this class for the duration of the challenge. So for the replay, it'll be up until the 1st of June. Then I take it down and it's only available to people who've taken part in the challenge. But this is quite a long video. So you've seen we've been here for an hour already. And then you want to take a look at what did Mia say about repetition? And then you have to trawl through an hour video for repetition. So what I do with these classes is I have a series of videos, which is called, I call them bite-sized theory, where I take it and I cut all of them up into small things. So the video is from about 30 seconds to 3 minutes. And then there is a video called repetition, and there's a video called viewpoint and dialogue, and there is a video called how to use this in dialogue. And then you can pop through those very, very quickly and very easily. So it's really bite-sized theory very quickly. And then you also get the daily emails, which I prefer to have I don't want to overwhelm you with like a ton of theory. Like this has been a bit of a fire hose, right? Your head is going, okay, lots of dialogue, lots of everything. So during the challenge, we break it down completely and you do a little bit of theory every day because I really, really want you to cement this theory in. This is going to launch you into a lifelong practice of dialogue. Okay. As a bonus for those who sign up, we have the punctuation class, which we will go through all of this in detail. Specifically, we have handouts, we have exercises, everything. It's really, really cool. And at the end of the class, I have a very robust dialogue workbook, which is way chock full of more dialogue, all kinds of things, which is a printable PDF, which you can keep forever and ever, which is really, really helpful. Okay. So that's for the friends who are going to join us and who sign up. You'll have both of these bonuses. Suzanne did the dialogue, and what she said is 30 days of dialogue is teaching you how to wave a magic wand. Yes, dialogue is that important and that powerful. Dialogue can turn stories from dull to vibrant. It turns telling info dumps into showing life on the page. It also creates that powerful white space, which helps the reader to relax and remain engaged in your story. In the 30 Days of Dialogue Challenge, you learn and practice all of that. All of these lessons are so valuable. You can use them for any piece and any genre of writing, poetry, short stories, novels, you name it. So if your writing needs that extra bit of magic, learn to wave that wand, learn to write dialogue, you're going to have fun. Okay. So our challenges work. We have lots of fun and it's really cool. So as I said, the dialogue challenge is $147, but for those of you who attend the class and watch the replay, you get 15% off. So it's $125. I will drop the coupon in the chat so that you can use that. And it will also go out in the replay email. I'm going to include something else in the replay email, which I want you to take a look at. It's just something very, very interesting. It's horrific sometimes as well. It's actually on an Instagram account called Get Called Out. But what I love about it, it's from a movie called Anatomy of a Fall. And it is a monologue by this woman who just absolutely lets rip. But it is something so, so, so fascinating to watch from a dialogue point of view. Because that's exactly what I talk about when I say conflict and dialogue and what is this kind of, it is a full-on screaming match that she's screaming at someone, but it is so, so, so interesting. And it's such a good piece of dialogue. Another dialogue exercise I would encourage you to do is Aaron Sorkin is a screenwriter. But he does really, really good dialogue. So if you do want to go learn from someone like that, go take a look. He wrote A Few Good Men. He wrote The American President. He wrote, I think it's The West Wing. And one of my favorite series, the newsroom. So it's really, really amazing if you want to go watch any more of that. Those are some really good dialogue in practice. Okay. I'm quickly going to, yeah, we love him, Sarah. Cool stuff. It's a pleasure. Yeah, please use dialogue. It's such an amazing thing. In my serial story on short stories, I use italics to identify the written communication between my two main characters. That's perfect, Dinah. Okay. It is often where they italicize the letters or anything like that. That's completely fine to use it. Okay. John said, or said John both. Yeah, so you can start with John said, comma, open quotation marks, we're out of gas, full stop, close quotation marks, or you can say open quotation marks, we're out of gas, comma, close quotation marks, John said. Okay. You can do both. Okay. Oh, John said or said John, yes. You can, as long as it's making sense to you. All right, that's the most important part. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. What questions do you guys have for me? What do you want to know? What I'm dropping into the chat now is that is the discount coupon that you can use, and this is where you will the link to go to the website if you want to sign up today. Otherwise, there is no rush. I'm sending all of this to you, and you can do it at your leisure, at your own time. It is just really a cool challenge, and we love it. Okay, so I'd love for you to come along and learn how to write dialogue. Okay. All right, give me questions, friends. Let me hear from you. It's cool. Thank you for joining me. It's where the part everyone goes quiet and just looks at me, and I'm like, I've either done a really good job or I've done an absolutely atrocious job, and everyone's confused. Thank you, Joyce. Cool stuff. All right. No, thank you, friends, for joining me. I really appreciate it. But are there no questions? Louise, did I answer your question about the is Louise still here? Louise, did I answer your question about the punctuation? It's a pleasure. Shah says a couple of questions about conflict and tension. How many conflicts is too many? I have two characters who are separated by the situation. One character has internal conflict, external conflict, and conflict with authority. Does the conflict always need to be resolved to satisfy the reader? Shah, not immediately. Most of the time, the purpose of the story or the reason for reading the story is to see how the conflict is resolved. So, and remember, conflict happens on two levels in all stories. Okay, this is one of the biggest things that we usually get stuck with is when we talk about antagonists and nothing's happening. I don't know what's going to happen in my story. And most of the time when we go look at the story, it's because there is no antagonist, there's not enough external conflict. So yes, we need the external conflict, but that external conflict isn't going to mean anything if you don't have the internal conflict. So the internal conflict is what is at stake, why your character, and what happens when they fail. Okay, so your question about how much conflict is too much, as long as the conflict is meaningful and the conflict is related to the main story goal, you'll be entirely fine. Okay, if you are throwing conflict in there like we throw paint at a wall and there's no rhyme or reason, I would be worried. Okay, as long as your conflict is firmly grounded in the main storyline, you'll be fine. So sources of conflict, antagonist, primary source of conflict, subplot, other characters, setting, major sources of conflict. So all your conflict won't just come from the argument between the two main characters, because that also becomes a little bit repetitive, and that might be why your conflict is resolving too quickly. Okay, so I'm just assuming a whole lot of things here, Shah. I'm not saying that is what's happening in your story, but those are possible things that could happen in your story. Is that you haven't varied your sources of conflict enough. And yes, you're completely right. We need internal and external conflict. Okay. Conflict with authority is usually where your character goes up against a system. So let's say, for example, it's a character going up against a political movement. It is an employee going up against an unfair work environment, or be it a patriarchal or sexist work environment, whatever that is going up to. So that'll be the conflict. That'll be your external conflict. It usually comes from the conflict with authority, and that's a lot coming from your setting. And then that internal conflict is why them, what happened to them, why is it so important to them? Is that helping you solve is that answering your question? I think what I want to know, Shah. Cool stuff. I'm just quickly checking the chat. Shah, you can let me know if there are any more questions. Oh, thank you, friends. Thank you. Thank you, Renee. When is the replay available? Oh, sorry, Bianca. Yeah, the time zones are always a challenge. The replay will go out within the next 24 hours. It probably won't be tonight. It's a little bit late on my side already, and it just takes a really long time to download and cut and upload and all those things again. So I usually do it first thing tomorrow morning. So you'll have it in a few hours. Okay. How do you do accents if it's a must for your story? And go look at how those specific people would speak. Okay. If it is a specific British accent, it's like there's a difference between a Manchester accent and a London accent. There's different vocabulary, there's different sentence structures. So just go see how you can try and play with that. And like you can also, the way they describe the voices, is it a very posh voice? Is it a very not posh voice, if it's a very like kind of street, whatever that is that you need to go describe the voice itself as in how they speak, or find ways that the dialogue that they're using. Okay.
It's I can just ask because
Yeah.
it's when I'm on about accents, it's because it isn't the King's English, like in a Brummie accent. You can always say, yeah, all right, kid. But how am I going to write that when it's not proper English?
Well, it's proper English to your character. So, I mean, go for it and just start putting it down on the page, and you'll find words and phrases that do the job for you. So, like you said, it's not the King's English. So, let's say, for example, your character comes around and they're suddenly using this like very big word, which is not common to your character or common to your character and their friends. And then he'd be teased because he's trying to, oh, what are you posh speaking like the king now or whatever. Okay. So go find ways to show that they don't speak in a certain way. And then, like I said, pay attention to yeah.
It's mainly spelling. I'm not a good speller anyway, so I worry about these things because it's like when instead of saying you would say yow, which is, you hear the difference, but I'm thinking, how am I going to put yow on the page?
You make your characters talk about it and go, goodness, what are you saying? It's like, I'm talking to Yao. And then you're like, oh, you can find a way. So usually the easiest way to do that is to have two characters who speak very differently. And the one saying, I can't understand you because what are you saying? And the other one's trying to explain what they're saying. So there has to be other ways to try and show what they're saying and find words that you can use in those phrases.
Okay.
So so instead of in a French accent, instead of changing the spelling of the French words, use words like bonjour or oui or merde, whatever it is that you need to do, and find words like that. So it's just difficult when you are writing in something that's very familiar to you. So like, for example, a South African accent sounds different. I mean, I sound different to almost everyone here. But we're not going to change the way I spell. So we're going to look for words that we use in South Africa. So one of the things that we say is we use shame for everything, okay? And we don't use it the way that you feel shame. When you have good news, you go, oh, shame, I'm so happy for you. When you get hurt, you go, oh, shame, I'm so sorry that happened, okay? We use shame everywhere in a sentence. Instead of saying yes, we will say, but yeah. And then we'll speak English again. So I'll go, but yeah, then this happened. It's just how, and that's like a very Afrikaans South African English way to speak.
What I'm thinking of is when you say, but what, it's how would you spell it on the page? Is what I'm thinking about.
Ja is Afrikaans. It's a different language. So I would use, like I would use we in French, I would use ja in South African. In Afrikaans.
Yeah, but if you don't know how to spell it in the beginning, that's my problem because I'm so bad.
You have to try and mimic the cadence and the rhythm of the speech as opposed to trying to change the spelling.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go to YouTube. Go to YouTube. Go to
Yeah.
YouTube and Google the accent and find words that how these people speak and see what they say. Okay, how they speak and what you can mimic in that. So it's a
Okay.
listening
There aren't
exercise.
any books that you know of where they do that sort of thing that I could look at.
Say that again. You broke up a little bit.
Do you know of any books that actually use it that I could actually read? Because it's the reading section I want to do.
It really depends. You're going to have to find a book where they speak in the accent that you want to mimic, and I can't unfortunately say that off the top of my head. Like I said, Alice Network did a Scottish accent really well for me, so you can go take a look at that.
Yeah.
But to find,
Okay.
you'd have to go. I would go spend some time with Google and say, I'm looking for books with characters from this specific place, and then go see how they did that.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Tom.
Awesome. Joyce, your question.
Hi. It's back to what you talk about external conflict, maybe one with system. And I've been kind of writing it without kind of pinning the word and just go, that's the perfect label. And there's this cycle of external conflict turning rippling to internal conflict, and this could be like a circle. And so I had this where, like something happens and you write out, why that happened. And one mentor told me, oh, you can't do that. You can't go too late and try to explain it. But then you also don't want to info dump in the beginning. So it sounded like we could also break it up into smaller bits so you get this cycle going. But I don't know. I just want to pinpoint it. I know there's no exact formula for it, but I like to know your view on this.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So you have a character who is going up against a system. Okay, so that is your character, and there is, like, let's say, an unfair political practice or human rights practice, and your character is going to go up against that. So how are you showing that? So hopefully you have some kind of way to personify the system, okay? Because that's usually where systems get difficult. Is like, the government is symbolized by this big building, but like, is your character going to stand in front of the building and scream at the building? So we personify these things. So for example, in Hunger Games, President Snow is the instigator and the primary antagonist and the one who puts all these people in the arena. But Katniss, for example, doesn't really have contact with him until she almost wins, or until the end, right? So who are the people who enforce the system? And those are like the guards and the Effie, and everyone puts her in it, and these people who orchestrate the games. Okay, so there's like a whole bunch of characters that reinforce this bad system or evil system that she's part of. Okay, and every time she interacts with one of those parts of the system, it comes back to some kind of who this character is and who she is. So Katniss's short thing is, we know exactly who Katniss is right in the beginning. Okay, so you might need to find a way, like, how did you put the personal stakes on the page so that we understand them when it happens? And for Katniss is, when we meet her, she is, sorry, this is like usually just one of the biggest novels that most people have known. Have you read Hunger Games? I probably should have started with that. So Katniss starts on page 1. We learn that Katniss hates other people. She can't stand her mother. She tried to drown her sister's cat. And there's another thing that she does. And she has no friends. She's really not very likable. When we meet her the first time, she's awfully unpleasant, and she has no problem with that. Then she goes home, and we see how she treats her little sister. And she's so gentle, and she's braiding her hair, and she's tucking in her shirt, and she's very, very soft. And then when the situation happens where her sister is chosen, Katniss doesn't blink, she doesn't hesitate, she goes, I volunteer. So just that, learning that she's an unpleasant person. We learn later why she's unpleasant. That's not explained at all. Okay, why it's so hard for her, what she's up against, why it's so tough, why she dislikes her mother so much. And then we see how soft she is with her sister. And then when she volunteers, it makes complete sense. And then as the story unpacks and unfolds, we get to know her better. And that's what you were talking about, those little pieces that we start weaving in. So you really don't have to dump everything all on all honest all at once, but I would be very, very selective. The first time you meet your character it's the same with meeting a human being in real life. We want to say, don't judge a book by its cover, don't judge people before you get to know them, but we judge people according to Malcolm Gladwell in seconds. Okay. So find that moment for your character where you can establish both the external and the internal stakes, because that's on the page from day one for Katniss. We know that it's the day of the reaping. Someone's going to the arena. Her life pretty much sucks and she's not a very nice person. Okay, so I would go figure out what the most important thing is. If I knew one thing about your character, what is that? And I would get it on the page, and then I would kind of, it's a little bit like an iceberg. You start with a tip, and as the book progresses, it becomes the rest of the iceberg.
Thank you so much. The word that really helped me is personification right in the beginning, because like and there's the anxiety of the writer, like scared that the reader's going to hate our character, and we can't wait to kind of info dump and explain all the depth. And just giving me this example of Katniss is, we have to hold it, and the personification helps with that. It doesn't become a paper, a theory on psychology and all that, right? So this is a big opening for me to see clearly.
So what you must always remember is that with character, okay, you're saying you don't want people not to like your character. And I'm going to argue people are allowed to not like your character, okay? Because we as human beings, all of us here are nice people, okay? And we want to be nice people and we want to write about nice people. That's why conflict is so hard for us, okay? Most of the time we kind of just don't worry, it's chill, it's fine. We get irritated, but we like kind of just roll our eyes and carry on with our day, okay? But with fiction, we get to exaggerate a little bit, okay? So you get to put the unlikable on the page as well, because that is the part is to go with Katniss, is she's thoroughly unlikable. But when we get to know her and we understand how hard it is, we are empathetic towards her, and hopefully we start liking her towards the end. I don't know if you've read Yesteryear, which is the new novel that just came out. Sarah, you have to read that. If you read Yesteryear, that character is horrible. She is horrible. The intention is for her to be a horrible character. Okay, we're not supposed to like her, and that's perfect. So go take a look. Your character does not have to be likable, because a character that starts out unlikable that we become empathetic towards is lovely. That's such a nice arc to have. What you don't want, and this is like, I don't care what else you do, your reader must have an emotional reaction to your character. If your reader is indifferent, you have a problem. If you either love them or hate them, and I kind of want that stronger reaction to it, okay? So don't be scared to make your character unlikable or just even slightly unpleasant, okay? Just a little bit rude, and then we can start unpacking why they are like that, okay?
Thank you. Yeah, you make the reader more attached by the end, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and we want people to like our characters because we like them. So we want to make them, but we need to put them through the ringer a little bit before we can like them. Okay. So just think about that. It's a pleasure. Larry, you mentioned inner monologue, I believe. This doesn't go into quotation marks, or is it italicized? If it's inner as in not spoken aloud, no, it won't take quotation marks because that's usually the character's thoughts. Whereas if it is a monologue where your character is standing up and like Hamlet's speech with the skull, that is a monologue. That takes quotation marks. It usually goes over several paragraphs. So you'll open the top paragraph goes, now I have to make sure, but you close it this side, but you open it this side again to show it's still the same piece, but you don't close it. Okay. So that's a little bit tricky. And I'm hoping I'm not telling you the wrong thing now, because I always have to look this up. But just make sure that if it's spoken aloud, it will take quotation marks. If it's your character's thoughts, it won't take quotation marks. Okay. That's the golden rule. Only literally the words said out loud go into that. Okay. Yeah, so with your quotation marks, you open each paragraph, but you don't close the paragraphs until you've gotten to the end. Okay, if it's a spoken aloud monologue over several paragraphs. Okay. Oh, Jackson Pollock in literature. I like that, Diana. That's awesome. What are your thoughts? Jane asked, what are your thoughts on monologues as part of a dialogue exchange? Jane, that's one of the reasons I'm going to send you that, but I'm worrying it's like almost triggering, especially for a creative person. This woman is having such a full out blowout while this character is her, I think it's her partner. I've never watched the movie, but I just see the clip. It is such a good monologue, and she is just completely letting rip into him. But you can see this is like years of pent-up action or drama and trauma and everything building up. So just make it good. You can do whatever you want. Okay, there's no rule against monologues as long as it's good. I don't want your character climbing onto a soapbox, okay, and telling me about climate change and how terrible climate change is and how bad it is. Show me the dry riverbed. That's how you show me climate change, okay? But don't put them on a soapbox and make me, kind of like wag my finger at me and want to lecture at me. That's what you have to be careful with a monologue, is that you don't lecture the reader so that it becomes author intrusion, because that's what we tend to do. I'm not saying you are, but that's what we tend to do. What are your thoughts? Joe is currently reading Lonesome Dove, and Larry McEltree does the accents quite well. Oh, Joe, and there's an example for you in the chat from Joe. Does this organization have an ongoing group chat for people to exchange ideas? Barbara, you're welcome to join the Facebook group. Yes, oh, thank you, John. Oh, turn on subtitles on YouTube. That's cool. It's a pleasure, Enid. Sorry, I'm just double checking for questions. Oh, look at this. Thank you, Mia. She said she squirms in her chair. Oh, shame, it was a lovely session. There we go, MJ. You cracked that. Yeah, Cheryl, I'm assuming you're speaking about yesteryear. Very, very unpleasant person. But thank you, Nora. Yeah, Sarah Strand, you have to read yesteryear. You will like it. Okay. Yeah, Cheryl, yeah, yesteryear was that it had a fantastic, it's a very, very interesting book to read. And I couldn't stop reading it, but it's like watching a train wreck. It is horrible, and the characters are horrible, and everything that happens is horrible. But it was really a very, very interesting read. And the reason I liked it is because everyone was so thoroughly unlikable, and we always tried to make our characters so nice, and we try to resolve all our conflicts so quickly because no one wants to be uncomfortable. But that just kind of, you just wallow in the discomfort. It's ugh. Okay, more questions, friends. Anything else you're wondering about? Okay, then I'm going to wrap this up. I will send the replay to you. I hope you'll join us for the challenge. It is a blast and very, very productive. Thank you for your time, and thank you for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, if you lie awake at 3 a.m. with another question, you're welcome to email me. Okay. Thank you, friends. Take care, and I really appreciate it. Okay. Bye-bye.